I'm John. This recording is called How I Incorrectly Worked the 12 Steps. I hope it's worth your while to listen to this. I usually skip anything called an introduction, but let's see if this is worthwhile. The question would be, why would you want to listen to anyone who is not an expert talk about how they work the 12 steps of recovery incorrectly? Now, I've been working the 12 steps for a couple of decades, and the first time I worked them, I did not get sober. So I'm assuming I did not work the steps correctly that time. But for the majority of this time, I have been sober, and I'm going to say probably the second time I worked them, I did work them correctly. But each person has their own unique experience. Each person may have, for example, given it every effort and didn't get sober. That happens. I'm not going to explain that. I have no idea. But most people, well, let me speak for myself. I did not work them entirely as they were originally intended, and I didn't recover. That's what happened to me. But the question is, why would you want to listen to a recording of me admitting I did not work the 12 steps correctly? My answer is, I think it's not easy to work the steps. I think most people, by the time they decide they need to work these steps, their situation is really bad. No one I know works the steps because things are going great. I don't know anyone who works them for casual or enjoyable reasons. Normally, the situation is desperate. In a desperate situation like I had, I was suicidal, which thank God I did not give in to that feeling. But I was so desperate, I was willing to try anything. People would say I had hit rock bottom. That simply meant the number of things that I thought might still work had finally reached zero, and I finally started working the 12 steps. That may be the experience of other people. That was my experience. So at that point, I needed to work the 12 steps. But did they work simply because I picked up a page with the 12 steps written on it and read them and did what they said? Did I get sober? No, I did not. I've not heard of anyone who just simply picked up the 12 steps on paper and read through them and got sober. Normally what you need to do is go to meetings, get a sponsor, work the steps, read the literature. That combination seems to have a very special effect. But even some people who've done all those things will say, well, I've kind of lost interest. I've skipped a few meetings. I didn't do what my sponsor said. And that's what I would call working the steps incorrectly. So I'm not condemning anyone for that. That's what I did for years. But the important part is I also didn't get sober for years. When I finally was given sobriety, it was because a friend gave me a set of recordings called The Big Book Comes Alive by Joe and Charlie, two very long sober alcoholics. They talked their way through the original 12-step literature of Alcoholics Anonymous and really looked at what they believed was the original 1940s era text. I followed along with what they said, and when they suggested an action, I took that action, and I got sober. So I'm going to say, in that sense, I must have worked them correctly because I got sober. Now, Joe and Charlie were alcoholics, and I am not. But the 12-step program of Alcoholics Anonymous was patterned after. It became the pattern for 12-step programs of recovery for many different types of substance addictions, alcoholism, drug addiction, as well as behavioral addictions. I was desperately hopeless until I worked the 12 steps exactly as they were described in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And then I got sober from my addiction. Now, these recordings of mine are short and they're very, very personal. My one person's experience. If you would like to hear a much fuller, better, and more detailed explanation of how to work the steps, I recommend the Joe and Charlie recordings. They're available worldwide. You'll find them, usually under the original name of The Big Book Comes Alive, but also sometimes they're just called Joe and Charlie Big Book Study. And they gave that talk all over the world for decades. Theirs is a long set of talks, much better than mine. So again, I'm simply sharing one person's description of how I work the steps incorrectly. I hope you get some benefit out of it. Let's be honest. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. It doesn't matter. All I'm doing is sharing my experience, my strength, and my hope, as well as my mistakes. Sharing like that helps me stay sober, and I hope it might help someone else stay sober. So again, this is John. That's the end of my introduction. Thanks for listening to it, and I suggest you start listening to how I worked step 1 incorrectly whenever you feel you want to.